Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Kelly Clarkson, titled Piece by Piece. You know, I don't miss a lot of things about pop music in the mid-2000s, but one thing I do miss: the relevance of Kelly Clarkson. See, as with most reality TV show stars, nobody expected Kelly Clarkson to be really huge. I mean, she may have been the first to come off of American Idol, but it wasn't as if her early singles were all that interesting beyond just being kind of pleasant enough. You'd expect that coming off of a Simon Cowell singer. As being one of those unfortunates who actually saw From Justin to Kelly and what became a future American Idols of very limited exceptions, the only one that springs to mind is Carrie Underwood, nobody really expected Kelly Clarkson to do well, especially not critics. But then her second album, Breakaway, dropped. And with a gauntlet of songwriters that included her peer Avril Lavigne and Evanescence members Ben Moody and David Hodges, Kelly Clarkson went for pop rock in the best way possible. She took all the powerhouse vocals that made her a star and added a really convincing rock edge to put her in the same category as artists like Pink. In other words, it was a huge positive and critics started taking her seriously. Hell, I'd argue she made better music than Evanescence ever did, which is kind of ironic. And when she decided to go even darker with My December in 2007, I had reason to be enthused, but also a little bit concerned. I mean, dark albums are kind of hard to pull off well. My concern was validated too, because looking back 8 years later, My December is a polarizing album among fans and critics alike. Mostly because it's a nasty little record with a lot of rough exposed edges that don't exactly make it a comfortable or easy listen. But in retrospect, I kind of wish Kelly Clarkson had chosen to keep going in this direction, because I reckon with more time and another album or two, she could have fashioned herself into something just as potent as some of the Alanis Morissette that she idolized. She could have made another Jagged Little Pill and we would have been better off for it. But as you all know, that didn't happen. Instead, Kelly Clarkson went back to making finely tuned, safe pop records with the guiding hands of Max Martin, Ryan Tedder, and Dr. Luke. And sure, she's made a couple songs that I like from All I Ever Wanted and Stronger, but they're nowhere near as emotionally intense as her mid-2000s material or as interesting as My December. In other words, while she may have had hits, she's not exactly relevant to the artistic conversation these days. As such, I was planning on skipping this album altogether until the requests started pouring in. But hey, she might have had something here that's somewhat solid, right? Well, I guess. If you consider solid yet another Kelly Clarkson record playing to modern pop trends and following that's barely distinctive from the rest of modern pop music, I guess you can say that's solid. But really, considering where Kelly Clarkson started and the fact that this is her 7th album, Piece by Piece can't help but be a disappointment for me, if only because it's so by the numbers and bland. Not just playing the tired cliches in modern pop music, but cliches within Kelly Clarkson's music itself. And while there are some songs here that I like that do try a little harder, at this point in her career, she could be making a lot better music than this, and that's a real disappointment. So yeah, let's start with Kelly Clarkson herself. And really, at this point, there's not a lot to say. The rock edge, it's gone, but I'm not expecting it to be here. Instead, she's working more in the smoother pop vein. And there's something more of a stylistic shift towards more R&B and soul flavors with the incorporation of choirs and groove-driven songwriting, which is kind of be expected given the rising presence of R&B and soul on the charts. She wants to keep up. And Kelly Clarkson still has a killer voice that's expressive and emotionally driven. It might not be especially raw at all, but she's at least got power. And yet she really does sound kind of checked out on this album. I'm sorry. I don't know if it's the slower tempo or the heavier instrumentation or the monochromatic production, which does not do her a lot of favors, but on more of the upbeat songs, it feels like she's just belting with a methodical, almost military rigor. There's nothing raw or really passionate about it. And that's not counting songs like Take You High, where her belting is just chopped and pitch shifted to pieces, really does not sound good, or Let Your Tears Fall, where it seems like the shift in vocal pickup between the verses and the chorus almost implies two different microphones, or Greg Kurstin falling asleep on the production board and not caring as much as he really should. Now granted, I could argue that was the problem for all the producers working with Kelly Clarkson on this record. Let me start by saying that her voice and approach isn't a bad one for percussion-heavy modern pop. As much as I've got a distaste for that approach, and that does come up on this album, she's got enough power to match her percussion, enough emotive presence to build to her own. And while the tempo builds to a decent clip, the choral vocals, when they do support her, we get enough of a melody, she's got some good songs here. The gleaming keyboards and echoing swell of Somebody, the faded guitar flutter in the piano of the title track, the brittle guitar line and the snare drum groove on Warpaint, the fuzzy rollick of Dance With Me, and the bright late 80s inspired melodies of Nostalgic that actually manages to give the keyboards and some strings some real swell to them, which I did like. The problem is, like most music in this vein, is that with the melodies consigned to those faded underweight keyboards at the back of the mix, many of these songs start to really blur together in terms of the instrumentation. instrumentation. And when so much of it is this heavy and slower than it really comes, it means this album really starts to be a drag. It's not so much an issue of abusing reverb here either. Kelly's vocal leads actually have the power to not get submerged beneath the production, but when the guitars and keyboards are crushed to the back of the mix, it makes the hook so much less memorable beyond the lyrics. And as for those lyrics, look, I'm sorry, Kelly Clarkson does not do subtle well, and for the most part, that can kind of work to her favor with her vocal delivery. I mean, I might not find the Sia-written song Invincible all that interesting. Turns out the only threat that she was facing on the song was one in her own mind, which doesn't really fit the tone of the drama of the song all that well. But if you can buy into it, it kind of works for her. But really, it's not that said song is bad, because I've heard this before from Kelly Clarkson. She's been writing breakup jams and empowerment anthems for over a decade now, and it's rare that she provides enough detail or character to the songs to make them all that unique or special. Or when she does, they end up running into issues. Somebody places her in the dumping role, and it's actually a pretty good song, and she's good at consoling the guy that he'll find somebody later, but then she includes the line after she apologizes for being harsh, "Sorry, I'm not sorry." I guess she's trying to be magnanimous and be firm simultaneously, but that lyric just really breaks the balance for me, does not come across well. The title track actually goes for some more personal subject matter, shocker, and tackles the bad relationship that she has with her father by comparing her to her current husband, and then saying, "He filled the holes you burned in." I mean, I get the emotional sentiment, it is one of the better written songs on the album, it's more interesting, but the inexact parallel just strikes me as a little bit odd with a couple of these lines. It doesn't quite fit together as well as you might think. Or take Warpaint, another bad relationship song that talks about breaking down barriers and being honest. But really, it's another example of Kelly Clarkson's usage of heavy-handed war metaphors that always strike me as way too over the top when it comes to these relationship songs. The slow burn piano ballad Tightrope on this album actually works a lot better. And probably the most human side of Kelly that we get on this album is Nostalgic, probably the best song, where she isn't so much looking for the ex to come back, but just wistful, missing the good times that they were there. It's understated, it's a little bit more subtle, and you know what? She's a good enough performer. She's great here. Shame we don't find more of it on this album. Hell, I'd even prefer more songs like Dance With Me. Sure, it's just kind of a dumb dance song that fits comfortably between a deep cut from Tegan and Sarah's Heartthrob and Taylor Swift's 1989, but it's still pretty fun, it's still well executed, I did like it. But the song that probably annoyed me the most on this album, not the worst song, but the most annoying one, was I Had a Dream, which honestly isn't a bad song, but where she sings about fighting to stay on top and how music can inspire people. And then comes the lyric, "Anyone can sell when they're selling out." Mighty hypocritical of you to go there, Kelly, when you had 27 other songwriters helping you with this album. And not counting that Christmas album, it could be definitely argued that you did sell out. Yeah, I get bashing the trend of using sex to sell music instead of actual content. But here's the thing, if it's not much like the actual content delivered on this album is all that original or interesting or anything that I haven't heard from you plenty of times before, and when you have production instrumentation that's not rising above any one of a dozen pop divas that I've covered using a similar formula, I'm sorry, the hypocrisy rings pretty loud here. Because objectively, I can listen to Piece by Piece, it's fine, it's agreeable, it's decent enough. If you're a Kelly Clarkson fan, die hard, you'll probably like it. But I can't help but be disappointed with this as a former fan of hers. She's capable of so much better than this. And for as much as Kelly Clarkson is trying to hammer those powerful emotions and empowerment into my head, without any raw edge or really gripping melodies or lyrics that rise above boilerplate, it raises little to no impact with me. I'm sorry, which means it's getting a 5 out of 10. I'm not saying I want another Since You've Been Gone or Breakaway, but 7 albums into your career, I'm sorry. It's gotta be more than this. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Keep in mind, folks, I'm a Kelly Clarkson fan. I really wanted this album to be better. Sometimes, though, it's just not. If there's anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums coming out that you want me to take a look at, I'd be more than happy to give them a listen. Until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.